I'm Silvia Ribeiro. I work with ETC Group, which is a small international research collective that works on the impact of new technologies on peoples and communities, and I am based in Mexico City. Well, corporations always have these kind of three ways of controlling, which is what they want. They want to control people, consumers, governments to increase their profits. That is their aim. And they have it through controlling big chunks of markets, and also by getting laws and norms that will favor what they do. And this is, for instance, through intellectual property laws, through free trade agreements and these kind of agreements, and also through technologies in themselves. But the three parts are connected. So, for instance, ETC has been for a long time working on the corporate concentration in food and agriculture. We have been working on this, making research on this for over 3 decades now. And what we see very clearly is that it has been an incredibly market concentration. So, for instance, in seeds and agrochemicals, which is the two first inputs into the industrial food chain, we have a concentration where 4 companies now stand, for instance, in seeds for almost more than half of the whole global market. But they are the same as agrochemical companies. They are so few, so I could mention them, like Bayer, Monsanto, Corteva, which is the fusion of DuPont and Dow, Syngenta, which now is bought by China, and BASF is a German company. And those, they have almost over half of the market in seeds, but they have even much more in agrochemicals. So only 6 companies in agrochemicals, in toxics, in agrotoxics, as we call them in Latin America, they have over 78% of the global market. So that is one part, but it's not enough. Having the market control. They also have they have provided all over the world, they have worked to make intellectual property laws and trade laws that benefit their interests. And for that, they went into national, regional, international, different kinds of agreements and regulations. And the third way, which is the technologies themselves, they have technologies that in themselves are an instrument of control. So, or an instrument of trying communities and people could, for instance, use their own seeds. So a typical example of this control is what we call some time ago, because this is not exactly new, what we call terminator technology, which is a technology to make seeds not viable in the second generation. And that means you plant them, and then you cannot get another harvest. So it's not only that it will be less harvests or anything, it will die. So this technology, for instance, in seeds, describes the mentality of the companies, which is how can we do a technology that people can only use one time, and then they have to buy it again from them, which is to have control over what people do with that technology. And you can see this particularly in food and agriculture. You saw this with the technology, this technology in particular, which is a genetic manipulation, is a transgenic technology. But then, now, today, because Terminator couldn't be deployed, because it was banned, de facto it was banned through United Nations because of their immorality of using a technology that prevents people to have their own seeds. They invented other kind of manipulation, genetic manipulation. So now they have, for instance, technologies like gene drives, they are called so, which is a technology that could drive a species to extinction. I won't explain all the technicalities of these technologies, but it's also another way of using a particular technology for control. But then what we have seen is that these corporations, they not only stay into only one part of the food chain. Like, for instance, in seed, they went also into agrochemicals. In fact, it was the opposite. It was companies producing poisons. That is their way of making their profits. And they then bought seed companies. And now we see that they are integrating through the whole food chain. So they have, again, more control not only on the market but also on different parts of the food chain, of the industrial food chain. So this kind of Zen mentality is not only applied to food and agriculture. It's everywhere where we go. We can see that companies are trying to increase their grasp, their control over people and also over nations, over markets. And they do this also through technologies. So I described some of these technologies like Terminator or gene drives in biotechnologies, but they are also trying to do the same with, for instance, the technologies that are applied to climate. So we all know that there is a very dire climate crisis, and the climate crisis is caused, among other things, because of the industrial food system, which is the single most largest contributor to the climate crisis. But also, of course, the whole economy is industrial economy based on fossil fuels. So in this climate crisis, what we need is to go to the causes, and the causes is this industrial system, the food industrial system, and the industrial systems based on fossil fuels and other related economies. And what happened with that is that companies, instead of going to the causes, they go instead to try to influence, again, norms that can favor their profits. And they can do it, for instance, with this new concept that they use now in climate, which is called net zero. And you will hear all over governments and also companies speaking about that. We are going to get to net zero in 2050. And that is really a trap. It's a trick, because we don't have any room to continue increasing emissions. We are already in a point where the emissions of greenhouse gases are in such a point that we have to reduce them. Otherwise, we will be reaching tipping points in the global system, for instance, causing floods and causing droughts that are extreme, and people cannot take any more of those. We are already suffering of those. But what does the companies that they resort to this concept of saying, if we can continue increasing emissions, because we will compensate them through net zero, is what they call. It's not about reducing emissions, it's about increasing and compensating. And they compensate it through two main mechanisms, either carbon markets or technologies. And technologies are particularly geoengineering, which is a way of manipulating the climate. So through carbon markets, they don't do anything in reality. In the reality, they only make more money by saying that they will compensate, for instance, by appropriating a forest that was already there, or by plantations that have a lot of other problems, or, as they are doing now, saying that they will use agricultural soils to sequester carbon, or even use water, sea bodies like oceans and seas as carbon sequestration. And to do that, they need technologies, because there is no way they can measure in a forest, in soils, or even in the oceans how much carbon has been absorbed. In reality, they cannot really do this. So they need to go to technologies that can measure this. And these are particularly digital technologies, which really cannot measure, but they at least give a sense that maybe gives the illusion that they are measuring how much carbon has been retained, for instance, in soils. The reason why they cannot measure that is because all these are living systems, and living systems are very dynamic. They are absorbing carbon, but they are also expelling carbon. And what they want us to see is that through technologies, like for instance digital technologies, they can take a picture in a certain moment without and get us to believe that this will be permanent, which is not going to be permanent, and they cannot demonstrate it. So one way of using technology to control this is this so-called certification or measuring of carbon absorption and what they call carbon sequestration. Sequestration is when it is permanent, but in reality, none of the living system is permanent. So it's a way of like forcing nature through these digital technologies. And the other extreme is that, all these companies committing to net zero in climate today, which is, as I explained before, is about increasing emissions and then compensating. So they compensated through saying that some forest or some soil somewhere will absorb. But the other way is that nowadays, of the 2,000 largest companies in the world, almost all of them has made some kind of net zero pledges. And there is not enough nature or soil or land in the world. So what do they resort to? They say, okay, we will have technologies that will artificially, by a technology, absorb carbon from the atmosphere and put it somewhere. That they haven't solved it neither. There is not even enough place to put all this carbon that they say that they will absorb from nature. So that's another way of using these technologies like geoengineering to give the illusion that we have a technological fix somewhere in the future where by absorbing carbon or by reflecting the sun radiation that reach the Earth, they will be able to manage climate crisis. But this is a really, really important and very dangerous trap, because it's not about the causes of climate change. So climate change will continue, and they will make new profits, corporations, through selling the technologies or through carbon markets that are not reducing anything neither. Well, we have today a presence of finance technologies that is really very heavy on, for instance, food and agriculture, but in all technologies, but it's kind of invisible in a way that people doesn't know about it. For instance, we in ETC Group, we have a particular document, a research document that is called Food Barons. And in this document, we made an analysis of how the three largest investment funds, like BlackRock, Vanguard, they have a presence in basically every step of the food chain. And they may have, for instance, each of them, maybe they have 5% of the shares of a company, but they have 5% in all the companies that control the market, which gives them a 360 degrees view about what is happening in an industry. And that de facto gives them a lot of information, because it's like if you are playing a poker game and you have all the cards in your hand because you are a shareholder in all of them. So you can manipulate if they will merge or not merge, or to which other companies, to which other fields, to which other parts of the chain. But when you put them together, you get to a percentage that could be even to 25, 30% of the three largest together. And that means that the financial companies in reality have a lot of say. They have a lot to say in each of these fields. And it's in reality, they are defining a lot of what is happening, for instance, in food and agriculture. But then you have a presence of digitalization technologies and of the companies controlling digital technologies that is everywhere, not only in food and agriculture. They are, in reality, they are in every industry today. And you have, when you go back and see who is controlling this, you will have a corporate concentration that equals all the other industry that is enormous. So when you look at, for instance, digital platforms, the ones that we all think, are familiar with the name, when you look at that, you see that there are 5 companies that they are called GAFAM, which is for their ancient name, because now they have changed, but it's Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Microsoft. And these companies, they have over 70% of the market in platforms. And they have even much more if you look at clouds. That means all the information that comes from any activity, it goes to only 3 clouds, which is Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So you have this extreme corporate concentration. In Asia, you have 2 other equally powerful actors, which is Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu. which are dominating the rest of the world, so to say. But these very, very few companies together, they have all this information that then apply both to agriculture, to different industries, and through the clouds. They have a lot of information on all of this, and is concentrated and monopolized in these very few oligopolies. So this gives them an insight on what is happening in not only in every company, but also in every field. And there is a complementary thing there, which is, I think most people in the world are not aware, is that we are all the time, not only as individuals, but also as, for instance, in an activity or something, we are putting all our data into these platforms and these clouds. And that means that they control that technology by themselves, and it's not so important for them to have the information from each of us. Which is really important is to have the information of all of us. And because of that, they make it very easy to put all the information for instance, into internet, into different clouds. And so, because what is really the business is making interpretations of this information by regions, by group, by preferences, and manipulating these preferences. So that is what they are trying to do. And with this power that they have of all the information the digital technologies have, they are, of course, also influencing a lot into governance. And they do that at international level, at regional level. In the case of digital technologies, they are barely governed. In reality, it's one of the most outrageous cases of self-governance, where basically there are very, very, very few rules. Like in Europe, there are a few more rules about so-called privacy, but that's nothing compared with all the information that they are extracting from fields, from activities, not only from individuals. These clouds are also concentrating the information from governments. In many places, the governments are using these same private clouds to store a lot of information about health, about education. And with the pandemic, all this really grew immensely. So now they have all this information together that they can reorder and systematize and sell, and has become a private asset, something that is our collective knowledge on many things and our collective ways of seeing life and how to do it. So the problem is that on one hand, these corporations, they don't have any regulation in the case, or very, very few or very limited regulations in the case of digital technologies. On the other hand, the other technologies, when they have any kind of regulation, it is to favor them. And now we have this new phenomena of stakeholderism, which is that corporations sit together with right holders and with people that are there for the public good. Say that governments, they may not do this, but they are supposed to be working for the public good, while a corporation is only working for their own profit. How can they sit together as equals around the same table? And this is what we are seeing more and more in every place in United Nations. So it's a complementary thing with technologies. Technologies are not regulated, and they are in itself a way of manipulating people. But at the same time, they have got these places in different conventions, in the climate conventions, in the biodiversity convention, in the Food and Agriculture Organization, where they sit along with governments as if they were an equal partner, an equal stakeholder, as they call it. And that is an extremely dangerous concept, because we really need that institutions make a very clear difference between those organizations and institutions that are acting for profit and from their own profit, and right holders, like peasants, like women, that are defending rights, things that all of us need to keep and need to defend, and governments that should be defending the public and the public good. Well, of course, all these all these ways of acting of corporation is also based on the present, gender inequality in the world, and is reproducing it and increasing it. And this is not only through who control the technologies, but it's not only like having more, for instance, more women. It's just that they are also making more invisible the contribution of women's. For instance, women's are the main contributors of creating biodiversity in seeds, but also one of the main caretakers of the diversity in forests, even in fisheries. And all this gets even more invisible in this world, in this digital world, where you get this picture that, because, for instance, a food can be traced from where it was produced to where it is consumed, that it can trace it in a virtual way by a digital technology. And they want us to believe that this is something that puts the consumer closer to the producer, and it's the opposite. It's like, it's totally invisible, and it could be even invented. I mean, you can say that someone was produced in Thailand and then it was consumed in Mexico, and you can see maybe where this chain of production went, but you don't know anything about how it was produced, who did it. This also make more invisible the contribution of women and all this that women has been doing with seeds, with biodiversity, with food, forever in reality, because it was women who invented agriculture. It was women who invented that we could plant seeds, and so it was a collective creation of women. And very far from there to today, it seems that it's a machine that can tell us that somewhere it was done something. So it's one of the ways where this gender inequality is again reproduced. And this is again reproduced by many other technologies. These new technologies, not only the technologies in itself and the risks they have, like in geoengineering, in food and agriculture, but also how the technologies are being used, like digital technologies in agriculture, digital technologies for everything, as we have today, how that influences us, but also how this interacts to strengthen the power links that are already unfair and just, and that they serve to continue increasing inequity in the world. And that is reflected both in food and agriculture, in climate fault solutions, and in many other parts. And what I think is important for movements is to really take a moment to reflect about which technologies and how technologies influence in our life. Because there is this tendency, for instance, to believe that digital technologies are something that is good because we all want internet, we all want to have phones and all that. But we don't have a real reflection. We have a real reflection, but we need a deeper reflection on how this impact our life, how this, instead of making communities function better, does fragment us, isolate us, and we know less and less, and how this is decided, how this is produced, who did it, if it was women, if it was young people, if it was how different ages are involved in all this. We know less and less, and more is virtual and could be even not a reality. We need to reflect on this and see how we can see which technologies we want to have, but also which is the cost, the environmental, the social, the economic cost of these technologies, and if they are really making our lives better, or on the contrary, they are making our lives more alienated, more separated from each other. I think it's very important that that movements look at these new technologies, and particularly digital technologies, and how they are influencing our lives, and which parts of technologies we may think we want to have, but in reality they have a lot of negative impacts. Like, for instance, in fragmentation, in isolation, in giving our data to corporations that then can control us. We live in this moment in the world where techno fixes, these technological illusions that everything could be solved via technology is extremely dangerous, because technologies also, this technological optimism about that everything will be solved with technologies also produce some kind of amnesia, that you don't know what caused something because technology will solve it in the future. And that is being all the time promoted by corporations as, we will have a technology that will solve climate, we will have a technology that will produce more food, we will have a technology that will cool down the earth, instead of really doing something about it. And that perpetuates unfair and injustice, an unfair system and injustice in the world. And because of that, we really need to question this technological optimism and recuperate the ways we want to organize in communities, face-to-face, indirect relationships that are the basis of any change we want to do.